On this episode of Locked On Canadiens, why is Kaiden Guhle playing the right side?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to episode 1154 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making your first listen of the day and for subscribing on YouTube and wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Doing so supports the show and ensures you don't miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I am Ian Boisvert, also known as @MaybeIt'sIan. I'm joined by the incomparable Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. Laura, how are we doing today?
I'm good. I did want to mention real quick because the day that this episode drops, it's Friday. It's the last day to donate. I'm doing RBC Race for the Kids this year, and I've put up the link to donate up on my Twitter, and it's pinned. My Twitter is @theactivestick. So if you guys have Twitter and you feel like donating, the cause is L'Hôpital Saint-Justin. It's the foundation, and they're doing a lot of groundbreaking medical research and groundbreaking medical, processes, procedures. I don't know, technology at Saint Justin, and I honestly think it's a really, really great cause. So I will be doing that race. Please, no pressure, but if you do, if you are able to and willing, the link is pinned on my Twitter account @theactivestick, and today is the last day.
Perfect. Good cause. Get in there. Help her out. We got a lot to discuss on today's episode. Laine spoke to the media about his injury, so we'll start there. And then we're going to jump into the mailbag. We got a lot of really cool questions, like the difference between systems and concepts, Caufield shooting, lots of fun stuff to dive into here. But let's start with the media cycle that hopefully now we are at the end of it, which is the Patrik Laine injury saga. The Montreal Canadiens are up in Mount Tremblant for their team building. They go there every year. And Patrik Laine is going with them despite being injured, which is just great that he's still sticking around. And he met with the media and answered a few questions. The one that I found the most, I don't know if it's eye-popping, but he said that after consulting with a few doctors, it was his decision to not have surgery and let his knee heal on its own. I'm not a doctor, so I won't pretend to be one, but it seems like at least surgery was on the table as an option, right?
Right. And I think the encouraging part of that is that he got a lot of opinions, right? He said he spoke to multiple doctors. I believe he said 2 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said that he made the choice and that he's experienced surgery before he understands. But to me, the encouraging thing is that somebody must have told him that it's possible to rehab this on your own over the course of the next 2 to 3 months. I'm sure he's sick of surgeries. It took him a long time to come back from the latest one. So I feel like the fact that they're saying that he could come back in 2 to 3 months is the most encouraging thing. He seems to be in positive spirits. He was asking, these kids should be in school. Obviously, everyone's really enthusiastic in Tremblant. They've all come out to watch the practices and stuff. There's some really great videos of the Habs meeting people, giving them autographs and everything. And he was just, he's the same old deadpan, why aren't these kids in school kind of thing. I wish I had that when I was in school, when I was a kid. So that to me was very positive, like his demeanor. What he said, it seems that he's done the research and he's thought it out, and somebody must have said it, this is possible. If you're careful, you can rehab this, because surgery could involve complications, and I would imagine would come with a longer recovery time.
Yeah. And, we can't take for granted that the Canadiens, if this truly was Laine's decision, the Canadiens allowed him to go forward with that decision, which, as we know in recent history, isn't always the case. Jack Eichel's whole saga in Vegas, he wanted to get or not in Vegas, in Buffalo. It ended with him in Vegas. He wanted to get a certain surgery on his neck. The Sabres said no. He said, trade me. They did. Vegas let him get it. So, not to compare the injuries because they're obviously very different, but, just that a lot of times it seems like the team has control over what procedures they may get. But in this case, it looks like Laine got the surgery he wanted, or the procedure he wanted, of whatever kind it was. He said he also doesn't blame Pare for his injuries, said he kind of put himself in a bad spot to begin with. Pare texted him and Laine respects him for that. So we can bury that. We're done. We're moving on.
Not before I say one thing.
Sure.
If you're a talented forward, you should be allowed to split the D. And if
Correct.
that hit hadn't happened and he'd scored a goal, had a great shot, we would all be praising it. So he shouldn't say
Yep.
he put himself in a bad spot.
I don't disagree. I think the onus is on the player defending to not hurt the guy. That's how it is with every other infraction, right? High sticking. Well, I went to hit him and my stick rode up. You have to know your stick's there. So it's the onus is on the person doing the defending in this case. Laine says he doesn't know how long he'll be on crutches or when he'll be able to start skating again. He's going to take it day to day to allow his knee to heal, which is the right approach. Do not rush this. We have, while January is kind of the far end of this spectrum, there's no reason to rush him back into this and put that knee in further jeopardy. So
yeah, the way I see it is we can get Patrik Laine for half a season, or we can get Patrik Laine for none of the season. So
yeah.
Let's do the half of the season thing.
Agreed. Well, that's the news there. Other than that, pretty quiet day, which again we will take given the media cycle of the last few days.
What a
But
relief.
it does mean we get to jump into our mailbag. I'll jump into our first question from Paul Branchot, who asks, I have not seen any heat maps or detailed analytics on Cole Caufield's shots or goals over the season, but I feel as my eye test says he strongly favors the short side, especially when the goalie is moving left to right. If he hits the net, it usually goes in. If he misses, the resulting shot off the backboards will pop out to the other winger, so it at least creates an east-west movement for the goalie, putting them at a disadvantage. While his short side preference seems to be working, I fear it won't be long before opposing goalies clue in on his tendency and try to speed up their lateral moves to cover that small opening he's benefiting from. What are your thoughts on this? We know Cole Caufield last year didn't have the season he wanted in goal scoring. Do you think maybe this is part of it?
It's possible. It's entirely possible. But it's kind of like with Cole Caufield, it's very similar to like when you're scouting a goalie and high into the glove side is his weakness, right? Obviously, Cole Caufield has a spot that he likes, right? But I think that the fact that the Canadiens paid him so much and have so much faith in him is that they believe that he's smart enough to be able to adapt his game and his moves accordingly. But I do think that it is worth, Marty taking a look at him. Like Cole Caufield always talks about what Marty has done for his career and done for his improvements. But I also think, being frustrated with that aspect of his game kind of forced him to better other areas of his game. So I don't think it's a waste, but I do think that it's worth looking at. And we know this team loves looking at video. These players are very used to it. And so my hope is that someone's already pointed this out to him.
Yeah, and I think, unless you have one of those generational shots like Alex Ovechkin, right? Everybody knows where Alex Ovechkin has been on the ice for the last 20 years, and it does not matter, right? Like they will not stop him. I mean, we saw a little bit of that too with Caufield against Robin Lehner when they were playing against each other in the playoffs, and Lehner made some comment to the media like, "Oh, he's not that tough to stop. He just always goes high glove." And then Caufield got a partial breakaway and went high glove and still beat him. Like if you have the talent, you'll still just beat guys with the shot, regardless of placement. But I do think it's important for goal scorers to, diversify a little bit. Like if you go high glove all the time, they're going to expect it. Mix in some other shots. I think there was that one clip last year or the year before that went, that people I think latched onto where he was in practice and Marty was teaching him to like fake the one-timer and then move forward a little bit and then shoot because you'll get everybody, mixed up. And then he did that like the next game and he ended up scoring off of it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I would like to see Caufield develop more regularly. We haven't really seen a ton of it, but, granted, we haven't seen a ton of offense from the Canadiens over the last few years. So that's more along the lines of what I would want to see. Not so much placement, because every goalie, most of them you can beat up high. That's just the nature of butterfly goaltending nowadays. But like how the opportunities that you create to shoot, how are you creating those? Are you creating them with deception? Are you just coming down the wing with speed and trying to beat a goalie? There's different ways to do it.
Right. But we can also talk about how Josh Anderson's game has struggled because he has one move or one style, and then he hasn't been able to evolve it when others have figured him out, whether it's the defense or the goaltending, right? So that's why Cole Caufield gets paid the big bucks. I mean, gets paid the bigger bucks. That's why Cole Caufield is part of this core for the future. talented players will find a way.
Yep, absolutely. And we will find a way in the next segment to tell you guys about our preseason rituals. And we're going to jump into that in just a moment. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Maybe you like the Colts as underdogs against the winless Jaguars at plus 128, or the Steelers over the Cowboys at plus 112 on Sunday night. FanDuel is the place you can get in on the action. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, we are back. But before we jump back in, I do want to thank you for making Locked On Canadiens your first listen of the day. But for your second listen, head on over to Locked On NHL, which provides a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day with national experts. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Laura, this one's from Randy Hansen. Now that training camp is open, what ritual, if any, do you have to get psyched for the season? I sit down and watch the Canadiens versus Red Army game, the Rocket, and finally Slapshot in order leading up to opening night. That sounds like a pretty fun routine. I really enjoyed the idea of doing that. What do you do anything special before the season opens?
Sort of. I make sure that like my viewing area is comfy and like I have like the right, because I've moved 3 times in the last couple of years. So a ritual has now been like, what is my watching setup? And obviously, because I am a podcaster, is there a place nearby I can put my notepad to take notes? I take notes like by hand, like an old school person.
Yeah, same.
So that's my thing, is like making sure it's ready for opening night.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. I want to clear my working space because now that I'm doing this show, I usually take notes during games like a nerd, but now I have a reason to. For me, it's mostly just spending the week like white knuckling, wondering what jersey I should wear because that's the only way I know how to impact the game, and I know that it doesn't work. Don't email me. I know that. But yeah, I mean, sometimes maybe I'll order a pizza, make a night of it, that sort of thing. It always sucks that it starts on like a Wednesday. Like I
Yeah,
wish they were starting on Saturday night.
I think so too.
It's kind of it should be illegal for Montreal and Toronto to not open on a Saturday night. Come on, get it
Uh,
together.
I think all of their games, all of Montreal, Toronto should be Saturday night games, no
I
matter
think
what.
the other one is. It's just this opening one where they're like, nope. Yeah, I remember growing up, I would be able to watch like Toronto and Montreal because they would play more often. They'd be playing on like a random Tuesday in February, and you'd be like, okay, I guess that's tonight. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. They're
There used to
always
be
marquee.
8 games within the division. It was 8 Boston games, 8 Ottawa games, 8 Toronto games, and then Buffalo, and I can't remember who else was in the division.
Yeah, if that
Detroit.
happened, I know I want more divisional games, but I think we would all die. That would just be the worst. We
Yeah.
wouldn't make it through a week of that. Anyway, moving on, Claude Sauvé, who sent in a couple questions. We'll get to his first one in this segment. I was hoping to get your thoughts on concepts versus systems when referring to coaching hockey. It seems to me that concepts are like a Jackson Pollock painting, throw something against the wall, see if it sticks. On the other hand, a system is more like a structure. When you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Concepts may lead themselves to the offensive part of the game, but when it comes to defense, which is ultimately how playoff games are won, I think structure is necessary. I just think concepts are subject to interpretation, whereas systems are more concrete. I get that systems are boring and concepts are exciting, but I think a cup run would be pretty exciting too. They are succeeding in building a culture when it comes to shared attitudes. I just think winning needs to be part of that culture. Laura, this became a conversation once Marty St. Louis was hired, the idea of concepts versus systems, because he came in, he replaced Dom Ducharme, who was very systems, and he is very concepts. What do you like if you had to summarize that? Explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. Like, what do you think that is?
Like the way I understand it is that concepts should fit in within a system. Like your system is your framework, and your concepts are all the little variables and your preparation that you do within that framework, right? And Marty talks about reads, for example. Like you read the game this way, like this is the action you follow. This is what's coming towards you. Like this is the situation you're in. This is what you're supposed to do. Here are 3 or 4 concepts you could apply to this situation. But overall, I think systems, like I tend to agree with Claude there. And he has asked similar questions in the past. Like I think Claude is like a very deep hockey thinker. Like I feel like he and Marty would actually get along. Like just like two guys go out, talk about hockey over dinner, that kind of thing. But I like the way I understand systems is that it's a framework, and you can have an overall system for the game, and you can have defensive systems and offensive systems, and then your concepts are all of the individual things that you do within those systems.
Yeah. I think that's a perfectly, succinct description. The one thing that comes to mind for me is Jeff Petrie getting so mad at the way Dom Ducharme wanted them to play. Like he was in the dressing room just basically, saying he wants us to play the system that none of us understand.
Yeah.
So a system or a concept is only as good as your team's ability to adapt to it. And if they can't do it, you could either find 22 new players to do it, or you can change the idea, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that changing the idea is easier, but that never happens in hockey. We didn't get rid of Michel Therrien, we traded PK Subban. That's sort of the mentality behind that.
And I think honestly, like I feel like a talented coach, though, like one who's actually good at his job, if you are not succeeding in implementing a system, change it.
Yeah,
You don't
absolutely.
need
You
to
need to
leave.
adapt.
You don't need to get fired. Change it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last question in this segment. Jessica asks, "Hello, I am a Montreal fan from Tasmania, Australia. I'm traveling to Dallas for work in January, and I'm so lucky to be able to make time for the Habs versus Stars game on January 16th. Before I purchase tickets, can you give me any advice on the best seats to get? This is possibly the only NHL game I'll ever get to see live in person, so I want it to be perfect. Do you also know if American Airlines Center, the Stars' home arena, sells other teams' merch for their games? I'm doubting it, but I thought I'd ask. I'm a huge fan of the show. Appreciate you guys. We appreciate you listening from Australia. That's wild. Thank you." I'll answer the second part first. I don't think that they would sell opposing teams' gear at the stadium, but Dallas is a big place. You can probably find a hockey-centered sports store nearby, right?
Yeah.
The Stars are a big deal in Dallas. Like they're not some team that gets no fans. Like
Yeah.
Dallas is a hockey town.
And it's
Um,
got a great team too.
yeah, that should be a really fun game. Honestly, like that'll be a good time. As far as seats to sit in most arenas, you really can't go wrong. There's only a few, like the Utah's arena. There are areas of the rink that you will not be able to see the rink because it's not built for that. It's built for basketball. The Dallas's arena is probably fine. I haven't heard anything about it being, hard to see things. If you want to, get like a broadcast view, sit higher up. If you want to feel like you're there, sit lower. You know,
And like honestly, like I know you are like your opinion is a little bit different, but I think you should sit center ice. You should
sure.
get not too close, a few rows up. Don't like glass seats, it obscures a lot of the view. And I know you said you want it to be perfect. Like you want to be in the lower bowl. You want to be about like 10 to 20 rows up, and you want to be center ice, like in my opinion, because you can see everything, you can feel everything. You're not close enough to smell the hockey stank, but you can see, and like like you don't have to look over glass and like things like that. Personally, that's where I would sit. That's my preference. But
Yeah.
also the Dallas arena, they do have like their advertisers, they have blimps like floating up in the rafters. It's really, really funny. And I don't know who the current sponsors are, but like it's always like the Chili's blimp is one of my favorites, but they have like the blimps up there. They used to have a car.
Yep.
But yeah, like that's one of my favorite things because not all arenas have them. Like in Montreal, you can't because there's just so many numbers raised up in those rafters.
Right.
I think it's really funny, but I always vote center ice. And Ian, I know yours is different, so
Yeah.
maybe you give your opinion and then we'll go to our next segment.
Yeah, I think you're right though for this particular instance. That sitting at center, right? It's your first game. Definitely do that, right? Like that's the experience you think you're probably going to want to have. You're probably going to have to fork over a little bit of money for it, but that's part and parcel with that sort of thing. I like
It's
to sit in the
relatively
corners.
inexpensive in Dallas, though. Like
Yeah, I can't
it's
imagine
not
it's
one of the
bad.
most expensive arenas. It's definitely it's not Columbus cheap,
Sure.
but it's definitely more
Yeah.
affordable.
Yeah, I like to sit in the corners just because it's a different viewing angle, or at the very ends behind the net, because we always watch it left to right, right, instead of front to back. which is like the play would be going away from you and towards you. So you get a different idea of how it would work. But I think in this particular instance, Laura is bang on. I think center ice, get, as close as you feel comfortable being. Watch out for flying objects, and you should have a good time. I mean, we can't guarantee you that the Canadiens will win that game, but it'll be your first game. Just go and enjoy it. Have a good time, and let us know how it was. All right, we're going to keep rolling with your mailbag questions in a second, including the reason why Kaiden Guhle may have been picked to play the right side, and we'll get into that in just a second. All right, we're back. And you know who's back? Claude's back. Claude asks, assuming Matheson and Guhle are paired together, why can't Matheson play on the right side and let Guhle develop on the left? It seems to me that the long-term goal for Guhle should be a top pair defenseman on the left side. I'm not sure there is a long-term goal for Matheson. That said, I hope there is, but not at the expense of Guhle's development. Another really good question. Laura, why do you think they're doing this with Guhle? Because I don't think it's new. They've used him on the right side before to play with Matheson, and it's not brand new to him. But why do you think they do it?
I think when you're doing that, when you've got two players who can play on either side, the calculation you have to make is which one of them you shelter. Which one of them you put on the side that they're like if Mike Matheson is supposed to provide more offense than Kaiden Guhle, I think that's the decision that gets made, right? Because you can trust both of these players a specific amount defensively, but one of them has more offensive upside. And I think Kaiden Guhle is a little bit more adaptable just because he's so early in his career. You can kind of like shoehorn him in anything and he's going to be like at like 70%, right? Like he's not reached his peak or his prime. You put him at 70%. Whereas Mike Matheson, you want him at 100%, you have to put him in an optimal situation. Like he's not going to learn any new things going past this point. That's my opinion.
That was going to be my take as well, that and I don't say this to call Mike Matheson old, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Like he's played the left side his entire career. That's where he'll be. Guhle's relatively new, even though he's played a couple of years now. But he's lost a lot of time to injury, but you can probably play him on that right side. And I think it shows just how much the Canadiens trust him, right? Like they're not putting just anybody there. It's Kaiden Guhle, who from the minute he made the NHL, he never looked back. He did not play a game for the Laval Rocket. So, that's a player that the Canadiens throughout the organization just trust inherently. So that's probably why it's him. Because, I mean, look at the other left shot defenseman. Would you want Jaden Struble to play that side? He could, but probably not. Lane Hudson? No. So, and they've structured their team that way. So I don't think it's a huge deal that he's playing there. I don't think it's going to be a knock on his development, but I also don't think there's a long-term plan for him on the right. Because I think it's just, hey, let's teach him to do this now. And then later in a pinch, we can use him on the right. If we lose a right shot defenseman in a playoff series and we don't have anybody else, well, Guhle can go over to the right side now.
Yeah. So, and I do think the long-term plan is to play him on the left side.
Yeah, I do too. Totally agreed. All right. Caleb asks, in perspective of Kapanen possibly making the team, is there a world where he's in the Calder race if he gets consistent deployment on second line and power play 2, or is that far too improbable? Caleb, I really love your optimism, and I really love how hyped this organization is on Ollie Kapanen. I do not think a Calder-worthy season is within his grasp. I think he's going to be one of the standout rookies this year if he ends up playing. But I just don't see a reality where he's, head and shoulders above, some of the guys who were just picked this year. So
I also think like on his own team, he's not the Calder favorite, right?
Yeah, that's true. We've already, that was one of my bold takes was that, Hudson will be in there in that conversation,
and that makes top 5.
Yeah. So, I mean, nothing's impossible, right? But even from what we've seen in training camp, he's looked great, but he just certainly hasn't looked Calder worthy.
Yeah, like the guys who win the Calder, like they're playing on that first line.
Yeah. Yeah, and he won't. I hope that, if he sticks around and we know Laine is going to be out a while, I hope he does get a look on that second line eventually. But for now, it seems like he's probably playing on the third line if he makes it at all, which is still Still up in the air, although he's with the team in Tremblant, so that's generally a good sign heading into their final preseason game. But in that final preseason game against Ottawa on Saturday night, we'll get a better idea of what they're looking at. If he's not playing, I can't imagine they're going to keep him. If he's playing, we'll get a good idea of, hey, they might keep him, and also who's he playing with. I think that third line is a lock for him, though. I don't think playing him on the fourth makes any sense.
I agree, 100%. Cool. If they were going to play him on the fourth, they should just send him back to Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, last question. From Muligano, which is a fantastic name. What fantasy hockey team name do you think is better? Destiny's Child or Darlene Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Oh, the second one.
Yeah, Darlene Mutant Ninja Turtles is my... I stumbled, and that's on me. I stumbled out of the gate on that one. I butchered it. But Darlene Mutant Ninja Turtles is excellent.
Yeah. So I hadn't heard these names. I hadn't looked at the DM because I saw the question and I could see it and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna let it play out because then I can answer it truthfully. And as soon as you said both of them, I was like the second one.
Yeah, I mean, back when I haven't played fantasy hockey in forever, but I remember there was always like 20 teams named Crosby, Stalls, and Nash because that was the level of creativity we had back then. These are both excellent, and if you use one of them this year and you lose, use the other one. That's my piece of advice there. All right, we're out of questions. So do you want to do some trivia?
I do want to do some trivia. I did get the last one right. I'm excited.
You did. So I'm going to read the question. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to take your victory lap. Name the player: Boston, New York, Islanders, Tampa, Anaheim, Ottawa, LA, Montreal, Philadelphia, Winnipeg, Philadelphia again. And the answer is
Nate Thompson.
Uncle Nate. Very brief time in Montreal, but definitely left his mark. He was definitely a fun Hab, and definitely a great pull for remembering guys, because that's a lot of teams for a guy to play on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really cool. Fourth line utility player. Always love that. All right. Today's question. I'm leaving the Ottawa theme in the past. We are done with it because I've run out of the Senators I want to talk about, which I'm surprised I got as many in as I did. So here we are. Name the player: Minnesota, Montreal, Boston, Tampa Bay, New York Rangers, Edmonton, Buffalo. I'll do it one more time. Minnesota, Montreal, Boston, Tampa Bay, New York Rangers, Edmonton, Buffalo. We wish you luck in figuring that out, but we have to run. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you liked us, please subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. As a reminder, we are free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can follow the show on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens or email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at LockedOnCanadiens. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.